Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Mueller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Ironwoman. We only have special guests. Today, we talk to Caroline Sposto. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Caroline. I do several things, and my background encompasses other areas. Long story short, I've always been absolutely fascinated by human communication. I've worked as a writer and editor. I've worked as an adjunct professor. In the late 90s, I co-founded a web development company that's still around, but I don't own it anymore. And now I run a business called Savvy Civility, which I started in 2018. What we do is we send actors out different places across the United States for education and research purposes. The best way that I can describe it, if you were learning to fly an airplane, you would go to ground school and you would learn everything on paper. And then from there, they wouldn't put you in the cockpit of that plane because if you made mistakes, it would be disastrous. Instead, they would put you in a flight simulator and you would fly the make-believe airplane through different conditions, different situations. If you made mistakes, you would remember those mistakes, but they would be made in a safe environment. Then when you progressed from there, you would eventually be out and flying the plane. One application of my business is to take people who are studying in the medical fields, physical therapy, psychology, pharmacy. I send my actors to the programs across the country. I have pools of actors in markets that are near these universities. They go out for special learning events where the students know that they're dealing with actors, but they don't know what the case will be about, and they are graded, and they interact with these people while the professors look on and rate them in their ability to take a good medical history, assess the situation, perhaps deal with a very difficult or unusual personality, all kinds of things. And then when the encounter is over, we break character, the actor breaks character and gives interpersonal feedback to the student. Mm-hmm. And so the students are learning things in a safe environment. They won't make a mistake, maybe with a diagnosis, with a care plan, with a way of handling someone. They'll make the mistake with the actor. They'll learn not to do that when they get out in the clinical setting. They'll be that much more competent. So that's one thing. Today, in fact, in Nashville, Tennessee, I have actresses out doing end-of-life simulations. These students are learning how to deal with someone whose life is about to end. They're dealing with some pretty good actors. They're learning by doing. You know, what they say, what we hear or see, we might not remember, but what we do, we tend to remember and understand. Hopefully, what they learn today will stay with them.
Do you provide the scenario? Do you write the scripts? Because I do simulations and there we have scripts.
These are semi-scripted for the medical cases like these. The actor learns their identity. They learn their chief complaint. Why are they showing up at the office to begin with? They learn their symptoms, family history, and lifestyle things. From there, there's some improvisation because, of course, the medical student is not scripted. So everything the actor says is in response, and that's how those are done. I also deploy actors for corporate training and simulation. In those cases, I will write the scenario, and when we send it back through the client, we get it right. Other applications of the actors for corporate would, of course, be training, sales training, for example. Does the salesperson remember to mention all of the new features of the product with a customer? This customer is in a hurry. How do they do? So we can try different things. It can be used in sometimes when a company wants to promote someone into management. You can say anything at an interview, but what do you do if you're actually sitting at a desk and two actors who are portraying employees who are in conflict show up in your office. These people who are up for the promotion can actually sort of audition for that promotion by assuming that role. Again, this is not a trick. They know they're dealing with actors, but they are people making that decision who are just watching it and saying, oh, this person really handled things better than that person. They would be good in management. So that would be another application. And the last application, and I don't write the actual script for this, but I write the audition script, is I send actors out sometimes across the United States when there is a 7 or 8 figure lawsuit. And what these attorneys want to do, maybe someone is suing a municipality, suing a state, suing a major corporation like a major retailer or an airline. They want to know, how will a jury rule on this? They sign 1 million confidentiality forms, and then they send me details of the real trial, including photos and voice samples of the real patient or real plaintiff, real sometimes witnesses, whatever. And I put out a casting call, and I get auditions back from actors, and I try to match them as closely to that real person as humanly possible. I send a reel with film of about 3 choices to the client, and then they make the final selections. And then these actors, sometimes on video, sometimes remotely on Zoom, and sometimes in person, like in a hotel conference room, they play out the trial while the focus group, who maybe 30 people representing jurors, are responding in real time with the hand clickers. And then eventually they'll break out and have discussion. They'll decide, do they believe this person? What would they award them? And so forth. That research is used so that these trials can often be settled without going to trial. That keeps the courts from being tied up. It also keeps the witnesses and plaintiffs from being re-traumatized by the whole ordeal. Those actors play a role in that. So those are my 3 applications: medical training, corporate training, and HR, and legal research.
I never knew of this. I learned something. I'm sure the listeners have many more questions for you. If an actor wants to work with you, so what are you looking for?
If they want to work for me on a more regular basis, they have to be located in an area near one of the schools that I serve. The next school, right now, I'm almost finished staffing up for Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The next school on the list that I know I'll be staffing up will be the University of Notre Dame. I want the people to be in close proximity because this is part-time intermittent contract work. So they have to be nearby. If they want to work for me in a corporate or legal capacity, they have to be right for the project. And that's the main thing. I look for actors who are able to improvise some because they have to think on their feet. This is not a strict scripted scenario like a play where they know exactly what the other person will say and do. They have to be able to stay in character the entire time because this scenario should match real life as much as possible. And they have to have a certain amount of stamina and resilience because these days can get long. And sometimes, for example, with the medical interactions, and these are not invasive exams, by the way, they're just a medical interview, cursory situation. They might see 5 or 6 students in a row and have to do the same thing, the same way, time after time after time. I need emotionally stable actors with good memories who can think on their feet and who love the work.
You have to play the same role, be stable for multiple times. And after a while, you're like, oh, I'm tired. I don't like this anymore. This cannot happen.
No, absolutely not. They have to have that kind of stamina and that kind of emotional stability, too. It takes a certain amount of emotional stability. And what we want, of course, to instill in those medical students is that same emotional stability where they can have a level head. Sometimes we'll throw them for a curve. We did one in Arizona where the actors showed up in prison uniforms instead of street clothes. Of course, the students knew they were actors, but would that, and we had them behave a little more aggressively, be a little more difficult, because in the real world, they never know what they're going to get. We did several in Nashville, Tennessee, where the actors showed up with the dirtiest clothes they could find, clothes stuffed into grocery bags, mussy hair. And then before the students met them, we had special effects makeup put on them to look like they were covered in sores. and they were to be a little bit difficult as well. Why? Because it's not just a regular medical encounter. The students are now going to treat homeless people. Do they treat them differently than they might treat the well-dressed, presentable suburban patient? And if so, that's something that they need to be made more aware of. So we do all different things.
I do corporate training and assessments. There we have the script. And sometimes it's not so easy when somebody goes off script. I remember one time there was a situation and the person says, "Are you married?" No. So we both started to laugh. As an actor, you just need to come up with like a potential good answer.
They absolutely do. And with the medical training, they also have to remember that the students' encounters are timed. They can't improvise to a point that will actually damage those time constraints. And they can't say anything that would throw the student off and have the student think, oh, this is part of the diagnosis. And moreover, they can't use the entire script, because if the student neglects to ask them a question that would determine the medical problem, the student has to learn that that was a mistake. Let's say the actor's character is supposed to be a heavy smoker, and they're showing up with a cough and shortness of breath. If the medical student does not ask about that lifestyle aspect of smoking, the patient says nothing. And then when we debrief, the professor will say, hey, by the way, this patient has coughing. You neglected to ask that.
And how did you get into this?
Well, there's a backstory that started out, sadly, in 2008. My sister was terminally ill. She had many friends. She was rich in friends. And the hospital room atmosphere was not festive or boisterous, but it was warm. It felt like a party, people in and out and talking, and nobody was being morose, as sick as she was. That was all fine until one doctor, for whatever reason, came in, felt the energy in the room, and decided that there was something wrong with us and wrong with that atmosphere, that we were in denial, didn't appreciate the seriousness or something. And she really kind of, I want to say she tore into us, but she kind of did. It was pretty shocking. And my sister was in her last couple of days. After that, the mood in the room fell like a balloon deflating, and it didn't take long. My sister never talked after that. She fell into a coma shortly after. Now, she would have passed away anyway, but there was no need for the doctor to do that. And I thought about it long and hard. I wrote an essay about it in a book called Final Chapters that was published in the UK. A few years later, I learned about the actors used for medical training. I took the job, got fascinated with simulation training across the board, and worked in every simulation scenario I could find within driving distance, for the military, for the Department of Defense, or the Department of Intelligence, for all medical things. And 5 years into this, University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis built a brand new simulation center, and they asked me to come on board as an administrator. It was a very tempting opportunity, and I thought about it for over a long weekend and decided that it would be better for me and just for this whole field if I were instead to start my own business and provide medical actors to programs that are smaller, that don't have it yet and don't have those resources. The schools I serve in that capacity tend to be physician assistant, nurse practitioner, physical therapy, pharmacy schools, not the full-on MD schools, because they're set up in-house. And so that started in 2018. And once the word kind of got out that I provide actors, then I would get calls from other industries as well, the corporate and legal.
We see many times that out of a dire situation sparks something. It's a curiosity, it's an interest. And then you're like, this is a business, this is a niche, this is a total niche.
It is. And there's not a person I've ever met who hasn't had their feelings hurt permanently by something someone said to them. They say that emotional hurts last longer than physical hurts. Helping people communicate with more empathy, with more foresight, with better thought, and with more practice communicating. It's a helpful thing to provide. I'd like to think that what those students learn with my actors, they will bring out to a clinical setting, to positive results, and to helping people as their career goes on. I don't know what the ripples really are, by providing these actors, but I would like to think that they reach far out as time goes by.
It can only be that, right? If you, as you said, emotional scars are harder than like the physical scars, and we keep them forever. The doctors have so much, or the nurses have so much authority over us as a patient or for a family that sometimes people don't dare to speak up, and it's of somebody's final days and you're already fragile, that the patient is fragile. If somebody comes and crushes your emotions, that should not happen.
No, it's absolutely true. It's about a lot of things. It's about showing empathy. It's about eye contact. It's about choice of words. It's about listening without interrupting. And the medical knowledge has to be there too. So that's what the actors are there for. They're the flight simulators.
Thank you so much for enlightening us, informing us. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Thanks so much.
What an interesting conversation. What are you taking away? Take it from the Ironwoman. We have episodes every Monday. There are many people with great, interesting backgrounds that everybody can learn from. Thank you for your support. See you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you.